It began on a day when the sun blazed so fiercely that every shadow seemed a secret waiting to be uncovered, and the air shimmered with dust rising from wagon wheels and horse hooves. I remember standing with my fingers clutching the coarse fabric of Mama's skirt, my knuckles white, my breath caught in my chest. Around us the settlers had gathered in a circle, their faces worn by sun and suspicion, their voices harsh as the scrape of flint on steel. They said Mama was a danger, that she carried curses with her, that no good thing ever came from a woman who did not bow to their rules. I was too young to understand the weight of their words, but I understood their eyes, cold, sharp, and ready to cut us away from life itself. My mother's face, though pale with fear, carried a strange dignity. She did not cry, she did not beg. She simply stood tall, shielding me with her arm as if her body alone could hold back the hatred of an entire town. The air hung heavy with judgment, the silence broken only by murmurs of accusation. I remember one man stepping forward, spitting into the dirt, saying she ought to be hanged or driven out before her misfortune spread like wildfire. My chest ached, my throat burned with unshed cries. I wanted to scream that Mama was gentle, that she taught me songs at night and pressed my hair smooth when I trembled. But no voice would come. In that moment, I thought we were already lost, swallowed by a tide too strong to fight. Then, through the blur of my tears, I saw him. He stood apart from the crowd, a tall figure with shoulders bowed, as though he carried the weight of years on his back. His hat shaded a face carved by sun and loneliness, eyes shadowed yet steady, like deep wells that had known both sorrow and silence. He had not spoken during the settlers' gathering, had not stirred when anger rose, but now, as the threat drew close and my mother's breath quickened, he stepped forward. The murmurs faltered, for the man was known by his solitude, a cowboy who rode with no companions, whose past was whispered about in saloons and never confirmed. He did not raise his voice, did not brandish a weapon. He only said, with a calm that carried further than a shout, "I'll protect you both now." Those words were not grand, but they were like water falling on scorched earth. The crowd rippled with disbelief. Some scoffed, others muttered that he had gone mad to take the side of an outcast woman and her child. But the way he stood, quiet, immovable, hands loose at his sides yet eyes unflinching, made even the loudest hesitate. Mama turned her head, astonishment flickering through her fear. For me, a strange thing bloomed in my chest. Hope, fragile as a newborn fawn, yet alive. In that moment he was a stranger, yet I believed him more than all the rest combined. The settlers did not relent easily. They hurled words, threats, warnings. Yet the cowboy did not waver. "Then you'll have to reckon with me," he said, and though his voice was not raised, it carried a finality that chilled the air. Something in the crowd shifted. Their fire sputtered. One by one they stepped back, unwilling to cross a man who had nothing left to lose, for such men are the most dangerous. At last, with curses under their breath and suspicion still burning in their eyes, the settlers scattered, leaving us standing in the dusty square, stunned by the silence that followed. Mama clutched my hand, her body trembling at last, and she whispered, "Why would you do this for us?" He did not answer with explanations or promises. He only tilted his hat against the sun and said, "Best we leave this place." And so we did, trailing after him, leaving behind the town that had never been home, walking into a future that held nothing certain but the sound of his boots steady against the earth. The days that followed were painted in dust and quiet endurance. We moved along narrow trails where the earth cracked under the sun, through dry creek beds where only stones remembered water. He led his horse with unhurried patience, sometimes letting Mama ride when her strength faltered, always watching the horizon as though danger might rise from it. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were plain and steady, like fence posts hammered deep into the ground. Mama, though grateful, remained guarded, her heart weary from too many wounds. I watched them both, feeling the space between them like a taut rope, fragile, uncertain, yet binding us together in our strange flight. At night he built fires with practiced hands, flames small enough not to betray us, but warm enough to keep the cold at bay. He handed us food without flourish, sharing his meager supplies as if it were the most natural thing. Sometimes, when Mama's hands shook too badly to light the fire, he crouched beside her, guiding the flint to spark, his touch careful, respectful. He never overstepped, never presumed. And slowly, like a river carving stone, trust began to shape itself in the silence. I remember a day by a creek where we stopped to rest. Mama washed our clothes in the cool current while I splashed nearby. The cowboy knelt beside her, rinsing a shirt of his own, his broad hands moving with surprising gentleness. Sunlight scattered across the water, turning the moment into something fragile and beautiful. They spoke then, in low voices I could barely hear. Mama said, "You don't owe us this. We are not your burden." And he answered after a long pause, "You don't owe me trust, but I'll earn it, step by step." I watched Mama's eyes soften, just a little, and I knew something was changing. But the world does not forget easily. Word of our escape drifted like smoke, reaching ears that still hungered for judgment. One evening, as the sky bruised with twilight, the distant thunder of hooves shivered through the earth. Figures appeared on the horizon, settlers who had come to reclaim their power, to drag Mama back into the snare of accusation. The tension thickened like storm clouds. Mama clutched me close, her eyes wide with terror. The cowboy stood tall, placing himself between us and the riders. His hand hovered near his holster, yet he did not draw. He met them with stillness, a man rooted in something deeper than fear. The settlers jeered, threatened, tried to shame him into stepping aside. But his voice, low and steady, cut through their noise. "If you want them, you'll have to come through me. And I reckon you know how that ends." There was no shout, no clash of bullets, only a silence so deep it rang in my ears. The men shifted in their saddles, uneasy under his gaze. They had expected weakness, not a wall of resolve. One cursed under his breath, another spat in the dirt, and slowly, one by one, they turned their horses and rode away, their bravado unraveling in the face of a man who would not break. Mama sank to her knees, her body trembling, tears streaking her dust-stained cheeks. I knelt beside her, clutching her hand, my heart pounding with both terror and awe. That night, as the fire flickered low and the world hushed around us, Mama finally let her tears fall freely. She whispered, "I don't know why you stayed, why you risked everything." The cowboy sat across from her, shadows carving his face, eyes lit by flame. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice rough with honesty. "I thought I was meant to walk alone. I carried my shame like a brand, kept to the edges so no one could be hurt by me again. But I see now. I was waiting for you. If you'll have me, I'll keep you safe, not as duty, but as love." The words hung between them, fragile and powerful. Mama's breath hitched, her tears glistening as she searched his face. For the first time, I saw her smile through her sorrow, small but real. The cowboy reached into his coat and drew out a ring, old and worn, but gleaming faintly in the firelight. He held it out, his hand steady though his eyes shone with fear and hope. "I've carried this a long time," he said softly. "I never thought I'd find the one it was meant for." Mama's hand trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing his. She nodded, unable to speak, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. The moment was quiet, no witnesses but the stars, no music but the crackle of fire. Yet it was more powerful than any ceremony, more binding than any vow shouted before a crowd. They leaned toward each other, foreheads touching, and I felt warmth spread through me, a certainty that though the world might still turn its back, we were no longer alone. We were a family. At dawn we set out again, the land stretching wide and golden before us. I walked between them, holding Mama's hand in one and his in the other, our shadows long on the earth. For the first time, I did not feel the weight of shame pressing on my shoulders. Instead, I felt lifted, as though love itself had given me wings. And now, looking back through the years, I understand the truth that settled in my heart that day, that salvation is not found in crowds or in approval, but in the quiet courage of one soul who chooses to stand beside you when all others turn away. And maybe, just maybe, that's what saves us.